Good morning, everybody. It's March 16th, 11 a.m., and I'm very happy to have Eric Wallerstein joining us today. Eric had been working at Yardeni Research for a while, then got an amazing opportunity to work at the Council of Economic Advisors for Steve Moran. And then Steve went over to the Fed, and Eric went over to the Fed, and now Eric's joined a research hedge fund out in Santa Monica because Eric, you'd been commuting that whole time from Santa Monica to Washington, D.C. I guess that was a bit of a brutal part of the job.
A weekly LAX to Dulles flight is not something I'd recommend. No.
And give us a little bit of an update on what you're allowed to talk about. Anything special that you were surprised by at the Council of Economic Advisors? Forgot to ask you, one thing I'm interested in is what database do they use? Because we use, as you know, LSEG data stream. Do they use a whole bunch of different ones, or are they
Yeah, I
competing?
mean, the economists use Haver, and then I did a lot of the financial market analysis for the White House. So I had a terminal, a Bloomberg terminal as well. But those are pretty few and far between.
Mhm.
The White House was interesting. I think kind of getting underneath the hood of the political process, especially in an executive branch like this one, is interesting. I think I was amazed by the dysfunction and which shouldn't be surprising, but it definitely is.
Well,
And I think,
it overwhelmed Tesla's CEO. Even Musk tried it for a few months and then gave up.
yeah, he had an Icarus rise and fall a little bit inside. It's pretty amazing in this administration how concentrated the power is. Obviously, Trump has tons of power and things kind of roll downhill from there. But even just a few core principles at any given time might be dictating, not only US foreign policy, but fiscal and regulatory as well. So
Mhm.
understanding who's kind of moving and shaking things up at any given time, I think has been really helpful for me, but possibly disconcerting if you're trying to understand where we're headed.
If you're a citizen.
Exactly.
So who are the powerful people at the White House? Is Steve Miller sort of like the Roy Cohn of today? I'm referring to Trump's mentor was one of his mentors was Roy Cohn, and I see a similarity between Roy Cohn and Steve Miller. Is Miller involved in foreign affairs too, or just domestic?
Yeah, I think he is. I think between Rubio, Miller, I guess Lindsey Graham these days,
Mhm.
Bessent, and then you have Hassett, Vance, etc. It kind of depends on what their remit is or what part of the portfolio. I think Venezuela was a really interesting intersection, I suppose, of Rubio and Miller
Mhm.
coalescing around Rubio wants to do Venezuela because he's Cuban, anti-communist. It's part of his vision for the Western Hemisphere. Whereas Stephen Miller's vision for the Western Hemisphere is more, oh, we might actually force Venezuela to take, some of our immigrants that we're deporting. And so it
Mhm.
was a kind of
Yeah.
a symbiotic relationship there that ended up pushing
Mhm.
up to Trump, who obviously cared about energy prices. But it's interesting, you kind of find like one or two people that want the same goal for different reasons. They
Mhm.
find, the same ends justifies different means or whatever. And that's how things kind of happen there. But yeah.
Who do you think Trump wants to be the next president? Do you think it's Rubio or you think it's Vance or
I don't think he cares per se, just whoever looks better and is
Mhm.
polling better. I
Just
think
as
right
long
now
as it
Rubio, I think Rubio is doing much better, and probably if there was an election tomorrow, he'd win. I
yeah.
think the big challenge is probably Cuba. Venezuela and Iran are two different stories. Cuba kind of presents its own challenges in that the public sector really can't do much other than domestic repression. They have a pretty small tradable sector. Their institutions are either non-existent or like highly incredible. Um, I just think it'll be really tough. So if we can figure out Cuba, then Rubio will be in great shape. But that's another 2, 3 years. Basically, if he's on the hook for it falling apart, then it's not great.
So what was your chore at the Council of Economic Advisors? Did you put out like a daily that was went up the chain, or just straight to Moran, or what did you how did you keep yourself busy there?
Yeah, so it was a mix of things. I'd say there were 3 core buckets. On the policy front, I did a lot of Monroe Doctrine or Monroe Doctrine these days, stuff which was much more about countering China's influence in the Western
Mhm.
Hemisphere, countering RMB internationalization, promoting dollar dominance, so policies um, there. And then I also did, Treasury has markets people, of course, doing analysis, but for the White House itself, I did a lot of the financial market stuff. So when Argentina was happening, I was kind of leading that analysis. And then if Vance or Hassett wanted to talk about it or had questions, like that was kind of me who was putting that stuff out.
So does the administration want a stronger dollar or a weaker dollar, or they've canceled each other out?
I think they want dollar dominance like any administration, but are kind of cognizant of the fact that wanting to expand your tradable sector and boost manufacturing while your real effective exchange rate is at all-time highs,
Hmm.
not exactly the easiest thing to do. So I think they'd like it to, fall a little bit, but they're not really doing. I think a lot of people would say tariffs are something that, or in kind of the trade policy would bring about, dollar movements, but I think
Sure.
it's kind of hands off to some
So how did
degree.
your job change when you went over to the Fed?
It was much different. Same boss, but completely different job. Frankly,
Yeah,
it felt like I was,
Steve Moran went over there and became a governor. So go ahead.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, typically you can't really be a political person and be pulled into the Fed, but because I had been there previously, they figured I might contribute something meaningful. And it really felt like I was plucked out of when I was on the desk during 2019 and dropped back into the same situation
Yeah,
because,
you had been in the Federal Reserve Bank of New York uh, desk doing the repos.
yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah. So,
you were there during the pandemic crisis. Then you
mhm.
went to the Wall Street Journal. Then you came over to me, and then you did your stint at the Treasury, and then at the Fed. You're sort of like the Forrest Gump of you show up at all the right places at the right time. So
Similar
congratulations.
intelligence levels, but yeah, also lucky.
Congratulations on that. So tell us about give us a short update on what you learned at the Fed.
Yeah, I mean it was quite sim I mean I feel like we were in a similar circumstance where we were doing QT, repo rates were trending higher, the Fed was concerned about losing control of the Fed funds rate. And so the first month or two, so I worked on all of Governor Myron's like external speeches and communications and all his internal statements at the FOMC. So we were quite busy with that. Pretty prolific producer of speeches in the first few months of his tenure. But I was working a lot on policy implementation, what to do with the balance sheet, and then kind of the intersection of bank regulation and monetary policy implementation. So Mickey Bowman, who is the vice chair of supervision, has a pretty strong bank dereg campaign going on, and kind of I was trying to fit all these pieces together. And now with Warsh coming in, I think it's a really important. It's the really important next step. How do we shrink the balance sheet, but by doing so in a way that banks, aren't still constrained on their balance sheet and the repo market just blows up again. So it
Mhm.
was really interesting.
You actually
Yeah,
sat in how many FOMC meetings?
just a couple.
Couple. You were there
But
at
yeah, I mean,
the
really,
December meeting, right?
yeah, it was really interesting to see the process. Usually they're pretty boring, but just given like we ended QT, restarted reserve management operations, and all that over the past few months, there was much more debate at these meetings.
Hmm.
So that was very interesting. Naturally, a lot of it gets baked beforehand, but being part of that process and then seeing it live is really unique.
So is Moran going to stay at the Fed, or what's he was supposed to be there only temporarily, correct?
I think if I had to give my best guess of what's going to happen is Warsh will come in, take his seat, whenever Powell leaves, Myron will be reconfirmed to Powell's remaining like 2 years on the board.
So
But
Moran, it's Myron or Moran?
it's Myron, but
Myron.
he
Okay,
doesn't really
so
care. Yeah.
Myron wants to would like your guess is he'd like to stay at the Fed.
Yeah, I mean he'll,
Mhm.
do whatever he's
Yeah.
nominated for, but I think he's a good fit and done well
Yeah.
so far.
You see a situation where Warsh might be along in Moran, like the two dissenters, and everybody else is the majority votes against what they want to do.
I mean, fortunately, a lot of the vote and the scenarios of you basically are given three scenarios and you can vote for A, B, or C. It's kind of all cooked beforehand, so there's as close to a unanimous vote as possible. It's pretty hard for like a 7-5 split to happen at the Fed based on how Powell has constructed that.
Hmm.
Um, Frankly, I think there are some pretty vocal hawks on the committee, but they're really not the strongest economists. I think there's the strongest economists on the committee are actually really big doves, and
Hmm.
they're either waiting for Powell's court case to resolve, and so they won't cut until that's done.
Didn't a judge just rule that?
Yeah, and then the admin can come back, and I
Okay,
so
a
it'll
mess.
take some time, and then
Yeah.
Warsh also has to be confirmed and get through the process. But I think that's the first step, and then the second step, I think, for some of the more like Democratic Party aligned voters like Kashkari and Goolsbee, who frankly were huge doves until Trump came in and have been more hawkish since. I think after midterms is when they'll kind of go back to their, dyed in the wool dovishness and feel
Hmm.
okay cutting rates because frankly, a lot of people have neutral lower than here, and the people who think that we're actually moderately easy, by and large, are not the economists on the committee. They're like Wall Street or consultant types or like repo
Hmm.
market type plumbers. Um, the economists who are doing modeling kind of themselves and with their staff, I think would like to see at least a couple more cuts.
Is modeling still got some influence at the Fed? I mean, it's certainly doesn't have a great track record.
There is a lot of modeling. I will say the staff are really, really smart, well credentialed, and know their stuff. It's been a tough economy to
Mhm.
forecast for the past 5 to 10
Yeah.
years. Um, and also, it depends on ultimately the FOMC are the people voting on what to do with
Yeah.
policy, right? The staff can only do so much.
So you didn't do any advanced planning for the attacking Iran, did you?
Hmm. No, no, I did not.
You weren't involved.
I mean, even with the Monroe Doctrine, we had such a different idea of what our Western Hemisphere orientation would be. And I think these are still policies that will happen. But ultimately, it's taken the shape. If you say like Monroe Doctrine, that everyone assumes it's take over Venezuela and next is Cuba, when in reality, there's a much broader and I think like durable, sustained plan that's being slowly like worked through. But that's not what gets the headlines. So.
And who's the power behind that? Is that basically all Rubio, or he's got some competitors in that in those?
No, I think it's all still. I think the entire administration has pivoted towards this Western Hemisphere
Hmm.
orientation. I mean, in terms of Treasury, DoD,
Hmm.
Export-Import Bank, and like the kind of lending arms of the government,
Hmm.
you're all pivoting towards critical minerals, rare earths in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
You're putting more war fighting, like, war fighters, more ships, more naval power there. We're kind of re-engaging with lending. I mean, we literally did an uncollateralized swap towards Argentina to help an election.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in the tequila crisis with Mexico, we took collateral like it was Mexico. Meanwhile, Argentina had nothing to offer. So I think it's really everyone has coalesced around this issue, which is why I believe it's so durable, really, and
Yeah.
will persist.
Did you ever have any interactions with Besant in your stint there?
Yeah, I mean, Myron and him are pretty close.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, they basically they came from different hedge funds in New York, right?
yeah, I mean, Scott ran Key Square out of South Carolina.
Hmm.
But I think through Manhattan Institute, which was the think tank I think they met
Hmm.
through. They got to know each other, and Myron has a hedge fund background as well, so that was kind of the
Hmm.
nexus there.
So where so you started your new job in Santa Monica? What are you going to be doing over there?
So I'm the chief macro strategist, but ultimately we are an alternative asset manager. We do have a private market like venture capital fund that does a lot of fintech and Latin America stuff, but on the
Mhm.
public side, we both seed like macro fund managers. So you're at a macro fund, you're spinning out, starting a new hedge fund. We write your
Mhm.
first check and then help you with fundraising after that and trade ideas. I obviously do more of the trade ideas, but I also
Yeah.
help with allocations
Hmm.
and fundraising. We advise sovereign wealth funds and pensions both on top of the house macro trades and allocating to external managers, mostly discretionary macro. And then we have a China business that has
Hmm.
onshore active like Chinese equities, essentially.
And so your the research you do is just going to be in-house, or you're I see that you also have a business actually selling the research. Is that it, or
So it's primarily the research is to serve our advisory clients, so allocators who we help, or macro hedge funds that we
right?
help, or just like the ones that we seeded, and I work with them a lot more closely. We do like sell research, so like if, for instance, you're going to give us money for our venture capital fund or for your advisory client or whatever, but that investment hasn't materialized yet, you might pay us for research until you actually like invest with us.
Any
So,
any comments on AI? Is that something that popped up on your screen or the discussions, written stuff at the CEA or at the Fed? And I mean, is the administration got sort of an AI initiative? Kind of a AI czar, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
yeah, I mean, David Sachs, who's a pretty prominent VC, is the AI czar. The DoD pretty publicly is using AI. I think Palantir and similar companies are fairly embedded inside the administration. So there's a pro tech, pro AI, pro crypto sort of push,
Mhm.
I would say. And I think the big thing was preventing states from hampering AI's development by doing like state regulation. So
Mhm.
a big thing for the administration has been limiting state power. It's kind of funny for a Republican administration, but limiting state power so that AI can kind of,
Have
proliferate.
they succeeded, or that's a work in process?
I would say a little bit of both.
Uh-huh. That's interesting. And what about currency, the Bitcoin and et cetera, all these digital currencies. My take was the Genius Act last year was sort of a first step in legitimizing and regulating stablecoin, and apparently it was a work in progress because there's still an issue of
Hmm.
interest payments, and there's this Clarity Act out there. The banks, maybe one of the reasons the banks have been weak. I mean, the banks have been hit by a few things, but the banks are petrified that if stablecoin uh, innovators are able to pay interest, that they'll just have there'll be tremendous disintermediation. I mean, I presume the administration understands that, but Trump seems to be, on the side of the crypto people.
Yeah, I actually wrote a speech for Myron at the Fed. That's public. People can Google it on stable coins and kind of in light of the Genius Act. And our thought was that most of the funds into stablecoins would come from basically places behind capital controls, those with hyperinflation, those with a lack of banking services, as opposed to it was almost like subliminally targeted at like the UK and Europe who are really worried about stablecoins, but in reality can access dollar savings like tomorrow. They can get a T-bill or whatever they want that pays interest. I think that story kind of goes out the window if you let stablecoins pay interest.
Yeah.
And it's not even just disintermediating regional and community banks in the US. I think it'll really affect the Eurodollar market and where foreign savings go abroad. And that would be unfortunate for us. And I think really limit inflows. into actual like duration and other US assets. So
Aren't
if they pay interest,
stablecoins
it's pretty bad.
aren't stablecoins a big deal in emerging markets already?
Yeah, and growing. The thing
Yeah.
is, a lot of them go to Tether as opposed to the US version.
Mhm.
So Tether maybe puts like half of those into T-bills and the rest into like long duration assets that actually don't influence the US loanable funds market. So
But nobody regulates Tether at this point. Is that
nope.
correct?
Yeah, lightly audited. Lightly is
Mhm.
even a strong word. It's barely audited. So
Uh, uh, Eric, why don't we? Uh, I just wanted to do some of these discussions and charts about what's going on in
it'd be
Iran.
great.
Look at some charts that I did in the morning briefing. Let me turn that phone off. Um, I did forget to mention that yesterday was my birthday, and my wife got me this nice cardigan sweater. It kind of looked like Mr. Rogers. Um,
Happy
and
birthday.
one of my children got me a Yoda. Yoda's kind of one of my favorite characters in the movies. And I guess in some ways I kind of view Eric as I'm sort of the Jedi Master, and I think you've become a Jedi Master. So it's you've accomplished a lot, and I'm proud of you, quite honestly. Okay, let's quickly somebody's intent. Sometimes you have to take people out of their misery and see if they'll come back. Let's do a little sharing here, and yeah, we'll go here. All right, so this, as our audience knows, I typically look at the market call that I do over the weekend, just at some of the charts. The war is getting foggier, and the markets have held up remarkably well, actually. It's kind of a point I made in the morning briefing. Stock market's down about 4 or 5%. The gold has gone nowhere fast. The bond yield's up, but no big deal. It's up from 4 to 4.25%. Um, so the lack of panic in the face of the panic headlines about 20% of Iranian oil, of Persian Gulf oil being blockaded just doesn't seem to have resonated with the markets, and not in a panic mode, anyways. And so it's conceivable. I mean, one interpretation is the markets, doing a taco trade, figuring that at some point here, Trump will just declare victory. And there's also kind of a perception that maybe the Iranians will finally fold. I've been arguing that the problem with trying to defeat Iran is the regime is they're professional terrorists. And so even if you decapitate the regime, you still have a whole bunch of other professional terrorists that keep doing the only thing they know to do, and that's to terrorize. And so it may be very hard to get them to certainly unconditional surrender at this point seems unlikely, but we'll see. But the markets, I think, also, as I'll discuss in a minute, have come to the conclusion that maybe it's not 20% of global oil that will be off the market, but more like 10%. 10% is still a big number, but it's not 20%. And what's the expression? High commodity prices lead to are the cure for high commodity prices. I mean, we typically say that for oil, and the market does adjust, and people figure out how to get oil out one way or the other. Meanwhile, the analysts community doesn't seem like they got the memo on what's going on in the Middle East. No sign that they or the company officials they talk to in the companies they follow are getting particularly nervous. And this is through March 12th. So maybe the analysts, like everybody else, the initial reaction was, this shouldn't last very long, and the result could be actually a very positive one. But anyways, as you can see, the 2027 number just keeps going up, and now they're talking about $370 a share. We're lagging behind them. We're still using 350, which a couple of years ago we thought was pretty bullish, and now they're using 370. This year was using 310, and they're at 317. I guess I'd like to see how this Middle East situation plays out before I get more bullish on earnings. I thought we were pretty bullish as it is, but the analysts keep raising their numbers, and so uh, uh, the forward earnings of the S&P 500 all-time record high. You wouldn't know that there's any problems in the world. And the same thing goes for looking at the quarterly estimates. You can see that, they've actually been inching up. Q1, which, obviously has been hit by this oil shock, at least in March. There's no issue there. Maybe some of whatever weakness analysts are factoring into their companies from paying more for energy is offset by higher earnings and margins for the energy companies. But again, here's the second, third, and fourth quarters, and all look pretty common to the upside. Same thing goes for S&P 500, 400, 600. So here's the 500 we just looked at on a ratio scale. This is the S&P 400, and this is the 600. And, this is, we've been kind of saying that one problem we have with the mid caps is this, that the earnings have been in a coma. But of late, we've been pointing this is out, that the earnings situation seems to be improving. I could use some help on why this was kind of flattened out now suddenly out of the blue. The mid caps are seeing better earnings and margins. I mean, this clearly had to do with the inflation shock, the tariff shock, and all those things. But now we got another shock, and we'll see how that plays out in earnings. The dollar, we've been on the bullish side or neutral to bullish side, not bearish side. Keep looking at this chart and pointing out that we're still at the bottom of this channel, but it looks like it may be holding, and we think it will continue to hold. On December 7th, we recommended rebalancing domestic portfolios, but we also did that on a global basis. We said maybe it's time to overweight the U.S. Basically, technology and communication services we downgraded to market weights because they accounted for like 45% of the market cap of the S&P 500. And the same kind of logic was, how can we recommend overweighting those two sectors when they're already like 45% of the market? Markets are already basically overweighting them. And the same thing analysis was for the rebalancing into going global as opposed to staying home. But with this war, that was working until the war hit, and then the U.S. is outperforming the rest of the world. And we looked at some of the countries out there. So, China, the United States, Canada, since the war started, have actually been outperforming. They've been down less than some of the other. South Korea, had that spike up, and now it's going down. Let's look at one more thing, Eric, and then we'll have a little chat about these things, and then we'll look at some questions. So figure one, we've got an oil spike, but it's not what it was here. By the way, it's important to recognize that all spikes are spikes. In other words, this was not much of a spike. This was, we stayed up quite a bit. But, how much real economic impact does this have other than on a short-term basis when it kind of reverses itself pretty quickly? And we did get up to 120 on a Sunday night a week ago. And that kind of led me to a kind of a more cautious view about things. And then this morning and last night's advance, I said, well, wait a second, maybe this 20 million barrels per day thing is overstated, given that it seems like there's a lot of things happening to get oil out. But again, I'm pointing out the markets have held up pretty well. 200-day moving average, we're bouncing off of that today. We've got the 10-year bond yield, okay, got down to 3.95%, big deal. And now it's bounced back up to 4.25%. We've been in this kind of 4 4% range for a while. And that's my gardener. Um, There's always something, right? That's what happens when you work from home. Gold futures, kind of interesting. They've been going nowhere fast. The weakness has been kind of startling, but I think a lot of that to do with the strength of the dollar. But if you take my crude technical analysis here, if we break out above that, maybe that's kind of the next move of up. We're still using 6,000 on the gold price by the end of the year. We're still using 7,700 on the S&P by the end of the year. Um, and I guess we figure, the taco trade is we're getting closer and closer to the midterms, and so maybe it's time for Trump to take that into consideration. And as it is, the poly markets suggest strongly that the Republicans are going to lose the House, and Trump has said he'll get impeached if that happens. So, if you think things are wild now, there's more coming. Crude oil and liquids are almost over 105 million barrels per day, and about the story is 20 million barrels per day have been taken out. Well, China apparently is a big depends a lot on oil coming out of Iran and the Persian Gulf. So is India, and Iran has already said that their ships or any ships other than those affiliated with the U.S. and Israel can come and go through the Persian Gulf. So that needs to be factored in. So it's and also the pipeline between Saudi Arabia and the Red Sea that can handle quite a bit of oil. Trump did bomb Carg Island, and he didn't destroy the oil facilities. I'm wondering kind of whether there's any plan to actually take over Carg Island and then kind of do what we're doing with Venezuela, telling Venezuela how much they can produce and where it goes. It'd be obviously a lot more dangerous to try that trick in Carg Island. Um, Eric, any thoughts? You must be thinking about all these things now that you got this position of having to strategize about all these macro developments. You got any unique spin on all this?
No, not particularly. I think the fact that there was really no day two plan for Venezuela spoke to the fact that there likely wasn't one for Iran either. And Iran is much more difficult than Venezuela. I don't know when it ends. I do think probably Europe is in the worst situation, regardless of it ending tomorrow or continuing on for several weeks or months, who knows. I think my initial impulse was just that the US will outperform throughout this episode. And until, I mean, like investing in parallel supply chains and kind of reordering your natural gas and oil inflows is like an unproductive to some extent investment. So that'll be tough for East Asia and for Europe. But I just don't think they have anyone to negotiate with. And Israel isn't really interested in ending this. So I think it's up to Trump. And maybe if the Senate odds flip pretty strongly towards Democrats and it's like 55-45,
Mhm.
maybe they end it. But
It's a good point. I mean, it's hard to get an end to this thing if you got nobody to negotiate with, and
yeah,
you keep
exactly.
keep cutting off their heads. Um, yeah, I mean, the sense as an outside observer is that they got a little cocky with Venezuela going so well that they figured, just
Hmm.
bomb the hell out of Iran and get rid of the leadership, and they'll have to surrender. And the question, yeah, about who, and if the top leadership gets decapitated, I mean, there's all these stories about the new supreme leader and how weird he is, and
Yeah.
how wounded he is, and so. Anyways, why don't we take a couple of questions here, and then we'll call it a day, Eric. I really appreciate you joined us here. Cagdis, great to see our old friend Eric there. Please say hi. A question to both of you, please. The fact that stocks have been relatively resilient so far during the war is a sign that they are already a good buy here, as we have seen the worst of the opposite. Um, expensive and exposed to meaningful downside. If the former, better to buy the market weighted or equal weighted S&P. Thank you both. Yeah, I mean, if the market's accurately discounting that this too shall pass rather quickly, or even if it goes down one way or the other, more and more oil will get out and be found. Then we probably go back to the pre-war action in the market which was to broaden out maybe the AI technology does indeed improve productivity, profit margins, profitability for companies, and so that would get uh, back to the idea of the equal weighted S&P outperforming the S&P. Any thoughts on that, Eric?
Yeah, I also lean towards equal weighted, and I kind of like mid caps pre AI pandemonia.
Yeah.
But still, I think the broadening out, I'm much more constructive on nominal growth in the US, so that supports the broadening out story.
Is that Mirren's influence or
That's
uh,
just me.
good? Okay. Caggies has one more. Also, best guess from Eric if Powell is expected to stay in the board post Warsh taking the chair role from him. Is Powell going to stay?
I think the longest he'll stay is until midterms, to kind of maintain that leverage over the administration. Ultimately, I think he's fine with Warsh. He'd be fine with Myron coming back in to replace him on the board, but he needs the court case dropped, essentially.
Okay. Bob has a question. Other than your research, what else does he read on a regular basis? How is your corgi?
The corgi is good. He's looking forward to having a yard soon. Um, I mean, Ed's research has always been a North Star for me, for sure. And I'm also reading, I never read the Soros book, The Alchemy of Finance, so I'm reading that right now. There's a lot of parallels between the 80s, which are lessons he draws on, and today. So it's an interesting read if you've already read it.
You were very diplomatic in not mentioning any other competitors. I appreciate that. Uh, let's see, Ian. Glad to see Eric again, and excellent idea to invite. Eric, you'll come on a regular basis, right?
Yeah, it'd be
Yeah,
great to come back on.
yeah, that would be wonderful. Ian, love to hear Eric's forecast of long-term treasury over next 3 years.
Yeah, I take a similar approach to the one Ed kind of cooked up a couple years ago, which my range for the 10 years is like 4 to 4.5. So we were at four, just below four on the AI mania right before I ran. I sold that. And then I think you can have wings at 3.5 and 5 on like extreme, fiscal policy things or maybe a recessionary scare. But I would also sell and buy those wings. I think we're going to be tightly tied to, growth basically on the long end.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page on that. Bill,
Yep.
does China come to the aid in helping the U.S. open the strait or stay on the sidelines? I'll give that to you, Eric.
I mean, they're helping Iran. So, I thought the chances of this Trump-Xi summit were like 50-50. It's looking less and less likely. The thing is, they prefer these summits to be really ironed out beforehand. So you can't risk the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska. For them, that would be terrible. And also for the US's side, we need rare earths to no longer be a source of leverage. And there's like basically theta decay for China on that. So each month that passes, each quarter that goes by, rare earths are less of an issue that China can basically use as leverage. So for us, if we can extend and pretend and, push this back a few months because Iran is going on, I think it'd be a good scenario for the US.
Well, China really doesn't have to do anything because if the Iranian government has already tell them, come and send your tankers and
Uh-huh.
and pick up the oil. I mean, we're not going to stop Chinese tankers from getting through the strait. And meanwhile, from China's perspective, getting the U.S. bogged down in the Middle East again is a big plus.
Mhm.
I mean, the nightmare scenario is, you know, do you have any opinions on why Z has been getting rid of all these generals? I think four out of five top generals have been purged, and there's two conflicting uh, scenarios. One is that Z didn't want to go to war, and the generals wanted to go to war, to invade Taiwan. And the other scenario is that Z wants to go. Uh, some people have been saying 2027. Maybe he s- keeps seeing these opportunities pop up where Trump gets himself bogged down now in the Middle East, says, let's go. And the general said, we're not ready yet. And he kind of gets mad at them and says, well, we're just going to get rid of you. It's from what I understand, they haven't even been replaced. It's like Z's
Hmm.
kind of like Trump. I mean, you know, one person makes the decisions. I think it's a potentially dangerous situation. But from Z's perspective, what a wonderful opportunity to do something about Taiwan when the
Yeah.
United States is bogged down. You have any thoughts on that, Eric?
So we do have a strategist based in Shanghai, Kai Wen, who's been here for about a decade, and I think his perspective is that there's a lot of like dual use investing that the PLA does, and Xi was essentially cracking down. I do think your point about Taiwan is salient. The US removing THAAD from South Korea, granted, it's not permanent. They can always put those missiles back into the installation. But we were supposed to be pivoting towards China and away from the rest of the world in terms of our, global military reach, and we're kind of doing the opposite at this point. So if you're China and you view the next 2 years as your best opportunity to make an advance on Taiwan, Iran's been going really well for you, and it's obviously
Yeah,
improving Russia's financial position as well. So that's a kind of a win.
yeah. I tend to read Neil Ferguson's
Hmm.
analyses. He's a pretty good historian, a great historian, and he makes it very relevant to today. And he's been asking the question, not really answering it. Is this the beginning of World War III? And you think about it, we've got this trilateral world, Europe, including Russia, where Russia's got its war with Ukraine, and now we have our war with Iran.
Hmm.
In a trilateral world, China said, "Well, why can't we have a war too?" Not a pretty picture, clearly, but you know, the markets have basically said, they're not giving any credibility to a potential disruption of Taiwan, which would obviously be a disaster for the semiconductor trade.
Hmm.
And I think we're trying to get production going here in the United States. I mean, I think we should just give passports to everybody in Taiwan and said, folks, just pack up your bags and come live in California, vote Republican, uh, and bring your semiconductor knowledge, um, and let them have the island. But hey, that's just my personal whimsical thinking. Eric, anything else you want to share with us? I really appreciate you joining us today.
No, this has been great. Hopefully we can do it again soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and have a good week. So far, so good.
Thanks, everyone.